Aloha, this is Reverend Tim Lytle from Unity Church of Hawaii here in Honolulu, Hawaii. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us. We have wonderful services and videos and messages. We're so grateful to stand with you in faith so that you manifest the highest and best in your life, because we know where you are, God is. All of God is fully present there. So enjoy our services, enjoy the message, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Ryan. Today, we're looking at the key to greatness, or who is the greatest? And that issue has come up multiple times throughout history. I mean, you might wonder, who's the greatest? Who do I consider to be the greatest person that's ever lived? Who do I aspire to be like? Who is the greatest? And it's a good exercise to go through. Sometimes I've written down the names of some of those that I've considered to be my greatest influences and mentors. And then I write down things about them that I am wanting to emulate, that I am wanting to live, that I'm wanting to express. And it's a great exercise to go through. We're leading up to Easter. Easter is April 1st. And so be sure and be with us on Easter Sunday. We will have both services. We'll have a great time together. We'll have even more music, even more stuff. It'll be even more expansive. But I'm speaking from different passages leading up to Easter. And so one of them comes from Luke chapter 22, verses 24 through 26. This is the gospel and the Christian scriptures of Luke 22, verses 24 through 26. And it says, soon they found themselves arguing about the opposite question. So I need to explain what they mean by opposite question. Just before this, in verse 23, the disciples are kind of in dissension and arguing with each other because Jesus has just said, one of you is going to betray me. It's like a game of Clue. Which one did it? And so they're wondering, who's going to betray Jesus? How could any one of us do that? How could any one of us possibly do that? And then they switched from who is the scoundrel to this question, that's the opposite question, about which one of us is the greatest. So they say, the disciples, which one of us is the most faithful, the most important? That is, which one of us is the most right? Which one of us is the greatest? Which one of us has the best agenda? Which one of us needs to push our way through because we know we're right? Which one of us is Jesus' favorite? Now, growing up, I couldn't believe this passage. And I grew up in a fundamentalist church, and so I was taught that the Bible was the Word of God, and you weren't supposed to argue with it, but I argued with it. It's like, what? How could the apostles, the people who were with Jesus every day, the people who were following Jesus, how could they possibly descend into a consciousness where they were competing with each other and arguing with each other and trying to be the greatest? And then I became a pastor. And I found out people are people. Whether you're in a church, a political convention, or at a hockey game. People are people, and they bring their stuff with them. People don't check their baggage at the door. They bring it with them. All of our wonderful baggage of past feelings of inferiority, or past feelings of being hurt by others, or past feelings of whatever, we bring with us wherever we go. And sometimes we play that out by competing and struggling to be the greatest, to be the one on top. And the way you show you're the greatest is by beating the other guy. And so we set up this competition. I shared something this morning earlier that got some quizzical looks. I brought tennis rackets with me. I haven't had the chance yet to play here, but someday I will. And I used to play tennis a lot. I used to play tennis regularly with this one guy, and we would play for a long time because we would play until we would tie. So we would play until we would tie. And if one was better that day, then we just kept playing until we both tied. Okay. Now, that's a little different paradigm than is typical in our culture. In our culture, competition, having power over others, asserting yourself, putting others in their place, that's typically what is considered to be leadership. But Jesus is going to teach something different here. Duh. Jesus is so countercultural. I mean, people who have issues with Jesus, do you know Jesus? Do you know what he's about? He's so countercultural. He's so about equality. He's so about experiencing the presence of God within, knowing that we are that presence, self-livingness as us. Do you know? Anyway, okay. These guys, they didn't get it, so they're arguing, which one of us is the most faithful, the most important? Ta-da! Jesus interrupting, so you could just sort of hear Jesus like clearing his throat to get their attention, like, please pardon me for interrupting this discourse on which one of you is the greatest. And he says, the authority figures of the outsiders play this game. It's a game. So trying to get to be on top, trying to be the best, anyway, play this game, flexing their muscles in competition for power. Now, that's a very important term there. In unity, we sometimes talk about the adverse ego. Now, the ego has a purpose. The ego is there to protect us. So when I get in my car, my eyes are open. I'm watching where I'm going. I'm watching where other people are going too. I'm watching. You have some of the most fun intersections here in Hawaii. It's like they're coming in from all different directions. They may have stop signs or yield signs, but they don't know what it means. And they just, here they come, and you give each other a shaka. Anyway, so the ego wants to keep us alive. The adverse ego thinks it's in charge. The adverse ego wants the driver's seat instead of the Christ, instead of the true self, the divine self. And so the competition for power, that's a good sign that one is in the adverse ego. Jesus is teaching us here that if we're fighting for power, we're probably descending a little bit. We're getting on this, what Charles Fillmore called the sense consciousness. The sense consciousness, rather than the Christ consciousness. So, flexing their muscles in competition for power over one another. Wanting to be over others, controlling others, pushing them, bending them to our will. Because we're right. We're right. And we've got to make them bend to our will. Wow. I think it was Jimi Hendrix that said that he was looking forward to the day when instead of people trying to have the love for power, they would experience the power of love. Okay, power, oh, yeah. Let's hear it for Jimi Hendrix. One of my personal favorites. You're going to hear all kinds of quotes today. Competition for power over one another, masking their quest for domination. Oh, and here it is. It's not just about competition and power over others. Let's mask it. Let's mask it behind words like benefactor, public servant. Oh, I'm your servant, so I'm going to try to control you. Okay, benefactor or public servant. But you must not indulge in this charade, this sham, this fraud. Instead, among you, the greatest must become like the youngest, and the leader must become a true servant. I can only imagine the apostles at this point saying, well, do we say anything to try to contradict him? Do we just stay silent? Now, what I envision is that one of them called for a vote. Let's see if we approve. But what Jesus was talking about there is learning to be a servant of all. And in the Gospel of John, Jesus shows this by taking off his outer garments, and then he kneels in front of them and washes their feet and says, as I've done to you, do for others. That is, we're here to be a servant. We're here to serve others. And when I think about the people that I consider to be the greatest, Jesus, Buddha, Martin Luther King Jr., others, I think of people who lived for service. That's what made them great, was living for the highest and best for others, believing in a world that worked for everybody, not trying to dominate and beat it over others' heads. So, here's another quote from some Sanskrit scriptures, Bhagavad Gita. This comes from chapter 11, verse 54. Verses are called Shastras, verse 54. My dear Arjuna, Arjuna was this person who was born into the warrior caste. Different caste systems. And so he was born into the caste where you're supposed to be like a physical leader and a warrior. But he wasn't wanting to engage in the particular duty that was in front of him. So Krsna shows up to guide him. And Krsna says, my dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So, what Krsna is saying is that, again, service is the pathway. Lao-tzu, in the Tao Te Ching that I've studied for years, talks about the same thing, service. In Kabbalah, which I studied in the Hebraic College of Judaism for 5.5 years, talks about service, that we're here to serve, we're here to express ourselves as God, and that the nature of God is giving and self-givingness and wanting to serve, and that those who refuse to serve are actually countering their true intention for being here. Because you are the self-livingness of God. There's only one power and one presence. And so that means that power, that presence is living itself as you, experiencing life as you. So when you experience something unique, you are experiencing it as God. And when you're encountering another person, you are the presence of God experiencing itself in some unique ways. Sometimes God has great disguises. But that's why Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, because your neighbor is yourself. So what we do to another, we're actually doing to ourselves. And when we serve another, we're actually serving ourselves. So I found that in service, an excellent means, as Krsna was telling Arjuna, an excellent means of experiencing the divine. As some of you know, once upon a time, I came into a unity church and I was trying to be incognito. I was sitting towards the back, about where, well, almost where Muriel is. Not to focus on you, Muriel. Sorry. And I thought, if I kind of hunker down in the seat and kind of get behind people, then they won't notice me. And they won't find out that I'm a minister. And they won't start calling on me to do stuff and expecting stuff from me. I can coast. I can observe. I can be a spectator like other people. And so I was sitting in the back. And after a while, the minister started to get to know me and started to get to know stuff about me. And she started calling me forward. Started pulling me to get in, step into other things. She had this prayer chaplaincy thing going on. I know ministers, and I know how they try to hook you in. And I thought, she said, I want you to think about it. Okay, I'll think about it. I'll pray about it. And inside I was kind of like, no, I don't want to do that. Because if I do that, what could it lead to? Right? So, I prayed about it, thought about it, wrestled. But I really felt inwardly drawn. My heart was pulled to that. So I started going to the training, but I was dragging my feet. I went to the training, but that didn't mean I signed up right away. I said, I still want to think and pray about it. And a friend of mine, right away, he knew, I want to be a prayer chaplain. They're clapping for him, and I'm like, sit down. But that Spirit of God was drawing me to service. That I'm not just there to spectate. I'm not there just to be an observer. That being part of a spiritual community, being part of a spiritual path means finding means of service. Finding the need that is around us and finding ways to meet that need. It means extending ourselves, stretching ourselves, getting beyond that narrow box, that confine that we've held ourselves to, because we're the only ones who've held us back. We're the only ones who have limited ourselves. We're the only ones by our consciousness who keep ourselves from fully expressing the divine. God is wanting to fully blast out and express as us. So, with much less fanfare than my friend, I told the minister, yes, I'd like to become a prayer chaplain. I feel called to that. And so I became a prayer chaplain, and she began to have me stand beside her as people exited from the service, so that if anybody had a prayer need, she would just shift them to me and to other prayer chaplains. And so I ended up praying with lots of people, and I would hold that all in confidentiality and just know the truth with them, and built this wonderful time of prayer consciousness with people. And I'm going to meet with the prayer chaplains at 1 o'clock today, and we'll do that more. And after a while, she called me in her office one day. And she's so sweet. And she used to be a recruiter. And so she's sitting in her chair. And she turns from behind her desk and she says, "Tim, I want to talk to you about something." "Oh, really? What?" She said, "Most people here already think you're the associate minister. Would you prayerfully consider actually becoming that?" Now, I had been a pastor for years in another tradition. I really had to pray about that. I really had to go through that. I had to deal with some past trauma. I had to deal with some stuff that I didn't want to deal with. I had to open my heart and expand myself. And I remember when I told her, yes, I feel called to that. And I remember the glee on her face and the gleam in her eye, and then understood that even better when 4.5 months later she retired. It was a setup. When we open ourselves to service, it opens our heart to spiritual growth. It opens us to greater things than we could imagine. So yeah, service is about ownership in our spiritual community or in our wider community. A number of you do things of service out in the wider community or in our world. But service, first and foremost, is a way that we expand our own consciousness, to take that spirit upon ourselves, as it says in Philippians chapter 2, verse 5. Let this spirit be in you that was also in Christ Jesus, who considered himself to be a servant. And so if we want to be the greatest, the key to greatness is service. The key to greatness is really learning to serve from the heart. It's saying yes and being open, knowing it's going to lead us down some paths that we did not foresee. Yep, trust me on that one. But that's how we open and expand. That's how we grow. We get beyond ourselves and our own narcissism, and we all have it. We get beyond our own narcissism and expand and be that presence of God in our world. Because we are here to express greatness. We are not here to fade into the woodwork in mediocrity. We are here to express excellence. We are here to express the presence of God living itself as us. And as we are on this Lenten journey, it's about letting go of those limitations that we have held ourselves back with and allowing ourselves to fully be the presence of God in action. Aloha. Thank you.